No, Lampert, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you, man. And I really, really appreciate number one, everything that you do. Your podcast, Synchronicity, is one of my favorite podcasts ever. And getting you on here was a true test, kind of a little of kind of the whole like synchronicity as a whole. But like we were talking about a little bit earlier, there is that little play that you have kind of like with the universe, it feels like, where because you've in your videos you talk a lot about planting kind of like a seed and then like letting it go, kind of like forgetting about it. Isn't that like a big part of manifesting?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're referring to is when, you're trying to like experience something or shift your timeline or jump timelines, change dimensions, whatever, but like really move into a different way of being. Um, we put a lot of emphasis on that because it's just such a big shift in our minds. So we kind of obsess over it. And that clinginess is actually what kind of pushes it away because what it's really doing is it's crystallizing that you're not that now. And when you're accepting that kind of into your subconscious and your way of being, you're pushing away that change because that's not what you are. But once you fully accept that that is what you are, not that it's what you will be, but that is just inevitably who you are, that's when the thing can start to happen. So one of the ways we do that is we make it feel natural. And if it's natural, you don't really like obsess over it, right? If you know you have something, like if you have a car or like, whatever it is, something someone would own, right? Whatever's in your
Yeah.
refrigerator, it's yours. You don't have to like think about, is it mine? Is it mine? Is it coming? Is I gonna get it? It's like it's yours. So that feeling of naturalness is like it's an important thing. And so like in that way you forget about it. It can still be this thing that you're excited about. I mean, you would feel excited if that change were to happen or that was who you were. So it's just kind of the acceptance of that and allowing it to come forward is like a key part of manifestation or whatever you want to call it. And the boundaries of that is only your imagination. It's only what your limit on what you can conceive of. And that's it's a pretty active and omnipresent thing. It's always happening. It's just sometimes we don't really see what we're consenting to in terms of like our reality, right?
Yes. Like when you ask a question, I mean, when you come to a decision, to when you have to make a decision, it feels like from a point from the future, it almost feels like you didn't have a choice. You were like, oh, I was just reacting a little, to like the circumstances around me. But
Yeah.
like whenever you're in that point, you do feel like those choices kind of weigh down on you.
Yeah. I mean, because you're making it serious. That's what happens a lot of the time. If you get stuck in a situation or you feel kind of trapped or things just aren't going your way, you start to buy into that on a deep level and it perpetuates the situation. And the trick is you can even be aware of that, but you still kind of fall into the pattern of doing it. And it's just an energy thing, it's noticing. And then it's just developing and cultivating skills that help propel you out of that is like the active mechanism. And I think if we like really look at it, that's what most of us are doing in life. It's just we're figuring out how to align energetically with what we would want life to be like. And we are constantly getting bombarded with external signals that really is just us creating them, but like it feels like an outside force that is a challenge or an obstacle or a situation or something we're afraid of. And we tend to react to those things and allow them to kind of dominate our consciousness. And like your world is created by your thoughts and beliefs. So the ability or developing skills to kind of work with that, modulate it, change it, whatever you want to look at it as, is like a meta skill that serves you very well in any situation in life. It's just the trick is to, how to come at that from every different situation and perspective in life. Because sometimes things are going wonderfully and it's super easy. And sometimes it's really the shit is just hitting the fan and it's like the hardest thing you've ever dealt with. And you just can't find that mojo at certain times. And it's like, how do you deal with it in each given situation? What's the right kind of course of action? That's like what we're doing basically in life.
Wow. So there's also this idea of kind of like, the imagination creates reality. Like you were saying, like your thoughts like literally create reality.
Hmm.
And you were talking a little bit about external reality and internal reality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
I
mean, go ahead.
no, yeah, you can go ahead, please.
No, no. Well, I didn't let you finish your question.
I guess my question is, um, like, what is that? Like, are we coming kind of like in and out of ourselves? Is there only one of us here? And like, if that's so, how can we kind of put into perspective that everybody is doing that while also like not pushing away the fact that it is still ourselves? Kind of like the
Yeah,
Jesus
it's
problem.
well, yeah, and it's like a multifaceted like you have to acknowledge certain key aspects of this dimension of reality in which duality is a thing. So there is self and other. That's like one of the rules of this reality.
Mm,
Ultimately, at higher levels of consciousness, you quickly come to the realization that it is just one singular entity kind of fractured off into multi perspectives of consciousness and all of these things and things we can't even conceive of, right? But it doesn't negate the fact that at these levels of reality, we know there's other people. Your conception of those people helps create an aggregate kind of score or qualitative score of what that thing is. So if enough people feel a way about Donald Trump, or he feels enough that that's how people perceive him, that combination together creates the various perspectives and impressions that one can have of Donald Trump, right? And we see this in any mass consciousness events, not just politics. This could go for sports, it could go for anything. We see this kind of like resonant collective agreement between individuals and mass consciousness, and everyone has it. Even if you're not like a famous celebrity or in the public eye, you're still attuning to that external kind of mass consciousness that is you, but it isn't you because it's obviously independent aspects of reality. And that is kind of like what we're dealing with here. We can think of like an omnipotent, omnipresent, everything being kind of getting bored with their situation of just everything being them all the time. So they kind of willingly fracture into many different perspectives and identities and inhabit certain limitations in time and space and consciousness. And that's kind of what we're playing out. Doesn't mean we're not still that omnipotent, core, powerful being. And we can tap into that consciousness, quite frankly, whenever we want, if that's something we care enough about. Um, and it's valid. It's not necessarily going to do wonders for your ability to integrate into this plane of consciousness and reality, which to me is somewhat of the point of being here. Like we could be experiencing any form of consciousness in any possible way. There's probably somewhat of a decent reason that we chose human existence or this perspective, time and place. So I try to honor that, but also know that like you're something far greater and far vaster than what your individual consciousness perceives. But we don't like negate that completely and say, oh, well, it's not real. We don't live like, because loving yourself as a path towards loving others or vice versa is completely valid as like a understanding and kind of awakening type of process. So, that's
mm,
kind of how I tend to look at it. And like those questions, I think they like come up a lot when you initially experience a lot of this stuff because it is kind of like a mind fuck. And you can kind of like go through this period of questioning like self identity and relationships to others. If everyone's me, can you kind of puppet string realities? There's all these questions that come up. But
yeah.
usually you learn a decent way to deal with that is just like accepting that kind of universal uh, conundrum exists in some way, and you don't have to fully wrap your head around it to accept it as reality. So, like, this and
Mhm,
that are true is an acceptable way of looking at things rather than it's only this or it's only that.
mhm. That reminds me of enlightenment a little bit. it pops in my head because there's this. I think Ramdas used to say this, that if an asshole were to get enlightened, he would just be an enlightened asshole.
Yeah.
And I think that's just funny because like I love your quote that says I think you quoted someone else. Maybe you can tell me, but that we are orchestrating the song. Our life is an orchestra, and we're conducting the song that we wake up to, and you're the conductor.
I might have made that up. I don't know that I got that from someone else, but
So good.
everyone else has said that in some way or another. It's not a unique thought.
Yeah, and I feel like once you come to that realization that what you were looking for, like you already have, right? But it's um kind of this position where uh we like only want things whenever we don't feel that. So we're like, oh, I don't feel this, so I need something external. But whenever we're in that place of abundance and whatever, you're not even thinking about what you want, really. Kind
You're
of.
accepting that it's yours and that you have it. I mean, I play
Hmm.
the game where I have a lot, and then I play the game where I have, holy shit, I'm about to have nothing. It's not necessarily a very fun game. I'm trying to work on the not have nothing part because it's like, all right, I get it. I've done this enough now that I get it. Um, but like that's the challenge, and like those issues or problems or obstacles are, we design those to learn about ourselves and things that are important for us. So they're not like mistakes, and you'll keep teaching yourself the same lesson until you fully get it. And I look at that more like as like training or like a school than like some cruel logical design flaw in the universe that's there to just like punish you. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't make sense to me. So you accept that, you surrender to it, and then hopefully you learn the lessons you need to learn to experience the type of reality more often than not that is worth it. But that also comes with like the ebb periods, the contrast. You wouldn't realize something is amazing unless you knew that it couldn't be amazing, right?
Right.
So like there's this, and you don't want to get like so appreciative of like the shitty times that you like stay in shitty times and that's your entire path. I mean, maybe you do. That's obviously up to people's personal preference, but um, that's like a part of reality too. We come here to experience the spectrum, where you are in the spectrum, how you know far along either side, positive, negative, whatever it is. That's your ultimate kind of decision. So yeah.
Hmm. That's interesting. I struggle sometimes with the idea that a lot of people, a lot of like wise people like Ram Dass, and I mean, there's the idea that we are perfect beings, like that idea like enlightenment is just like realization that you are already there, like you were saying, right? Like
Mhm.
you are perfect, you are an infinite being, but at the same time, you wouldn't be here if like you were perfect. There's also that idea that like you were saying we're in a school and that we are here to learn and get better. But that's just like a paradox in my head. Like if we are an infinite being, how can we why are
Well,
we
you're an
here to
infinite being,
learn?
experience certain limitations. I mean, you recognize that gravity is in ways a limitation on how high we can jump, on the way velocity and force and mass work in this world. That's just a limitation. It doesn't even mean it's a good or a bad thing. It just is the way it is. So
Mm.
that's what I mean by like different dimensions of consciousness. If you go up to like complete God consciousness, you recognize the one that people do this on LSD trips, whatever it is, you go to that level of awareness and kind of consciousness where you recognize the truth and reality there, and you can sit there and bask in the glow of oneness. But if you've signed up for a human incarnation, you will also experience the not oneness of everything. So it's not that you have to be like, people have a conception of what being enlightened or fully awake means. They picture someone in like a white robe who's talking softly, who's like blessing and healing people, and like whatever that conception or idea they have in their head of like that figure, that archetype, is what people think that that's what that means. And the Ram Dass quote there about being an enlightened asshole is exactly right. Like you will bring your own particular individual flavor and character to whatever the perfect version of you is. You determine that though. It's your conception and belief of who you are that summons that aspect of being out. And a lot of us resist that because it changes everything. It changes your perspective on yourself, on life, on how you experience things. And that can be a very scary thing, even if it feels like something you want. It can be like skydiving, and not everyone wants to go
Mm,
skydiving. So I
wow,
completely get it.
exactly.
It's just like how far do you want to go down that rabbit hole? And I personally think like if people go too fast, too hard, it's not a pleasant experience. Usually, you learn a lot of tough lessons, so to speak. But most people are pretty good these days at stabilizing their consciousness and like understanding these concepts and like allowing it to like still work somehow. But like these paradoxical questions like that are usually answered with like, this and that. There are many levels of reality happening simultaneously. Time isn't just experienced linearly, even by us. If we dream, those jump cuts that happen in dreams. You're here at one place, then all of a sudden the whole scene switches and you're there somewhere else. There's no like cut, there was no transition into that sequence. And our awareness is very much like that. If we had like a grid where we could see the thoughts that we're having and how quickly we jump from thing to thing, just based on how our neural pathways, our physiological neural pathways work, and how the synapses like fire little electrical signals between each other that create thoughts and patterns. Like it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that we experience reality like this, but I mean, it's functional enough. It may not be the most elegant way of experiencing consciousness in the universe or all of reality, but I mean, it's certainly functional enough. And like the experience of time as a linear aspect is certainly helpful for navigating a 3D time space. It would be much harder, I think, for a lot of us. I mean, if you just instantly got
Yeah.
transported to whatever you were thinking about, I don't know that a lot of us would have like the
Mm,
most pleasant reality.
wow. Yeah. It reminds me of the idea that um of nothingness, how in Buddhism enlightenment gets compared a lot to emptiness,
Well,
and
they
how
refer to enlightenment as the union of emptiness and bliss, if we're talking about the Tibetan Buddhists,
mm,
particularly. Um, so, yeah, Vajrayana Buddhism. So, I mean, that's like the Dalai Lama is part of that school. That is certainly a very valid proposition in theory for how things work. You know, it doesn't seem at odds with any other thing I understand or have come to experience in the multiverse universe reality. I mean, emptiness and void is the template in which somethingness needs to exist. Again, there's that duality. Uh, So, makes sense to me.
exactly. It kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that you, in order to become nothing or nobody, you need to become somebody first.
Yeah, I mean, you're inherently born with a perspective and view on yourself and the world. I haven't met anyone who doesn't have that. I mean, it's just a natural part of being. It's how you construct and identify with aspects of your being that determine your experience
What
as a
about
being.
babies? Do you think little
Of
kids?
course, I mean, yeah, 3 kids. I mean, they're born with identities and perspectives on the world from the second they come out. There's no doubt in my mind
Mm,
that that is a preformed aspect of experiencing reality. I mean, there's all these other things, nature, nurture, environmentally, where you are and genetically what you experience the world as, of course, but every being that I've encountered has some inherent, even like animals, right? I mean, and there's a lot of mystics who have very wild thoughts on animals and what they represent and what they are, and just in the cosmology and etymology of like where animals fit into our metaphysical realities. I mean, you can tell when something has an energetic vibration that we would say, okay, this thing is alive. Even plants, fungi, like that you can tell like there's an awareness there. And ultimately, like I said, that is us too. We animate that by being aware of it. So we shouldn't forget that that exists as a principle.
Do you think that we are constantly reincarnating? What are your thoughts on reincarnation? With
It depends how what lens you want to look at it through. I mean, it's all true, I guess. I mean, like, yeah, you had past lives. I don't know that that's necessarily the most functional way of looking at reality. I mean, even if you can tap into like past life regression, you were like some weird Egyptian king or archetype. I mean, what weren't you if you're everything? So, I mean, I think that helps you gain insight into who you are now. But I also think there's a reason that if reincarnation is an active principle, there is kind of an amnesiac quality to it. So we don't necessarily remember past lives for whatever reason. I don't think that negates their existence. But I also think reincarnation is just like a constant omnipresent, it's always happening. You are constantly deconstructing and reconstructing some awareness at every moment in time, and why that would be limited to like one particular form or vessel, even if that's what our experience of it is over time, certainly wouldn't take away the possibility that there are other ways of experiencing that and other points of awareness that maybe what we identify as a certain combination of awareness, which we experience as ourselves, wouldn't inhabit different physical forms or whatever.
so, do you think that would make death kind of just like another moment like this one?
Sure. I mean, yeah, but that's not how most of us conceive of death because there is an unknown, mysterious quality to it. And the physical form obviously goes through a transformation. And we wonder what our consciousness will be like unbound. How will we experience ourselves? Where will we go? Will we even exist? Do we just get like blended in with the everythingness of the universe? And I think that's everyone for everyone to figure out while they're alive and through the active death process. If I
Mhm.
believe your reality, your consciousness creates your reality. Obviously, that's not going to be while it only applies when you're in a body, right? So, like when you're out of the body, I would think there is more of a possibility to construct and perceive realities. But how we experiencing that and how much control or awareness we have of that process is something that it warrants thinking about death, and enough that it doesn't like it can bum you out, but like don't let it consume your life.
Interesting. Yeah, I really like this quote. It made me think of it a little. That is the do nothing and nothing shall go undone. It's kind of like the idea that a lot of people when they get into manifestation, or they're sad or something, they won't necessarily have a goal, for example, and that'll sometimes dismotivate them. But I think what you told me one time was, if you don't have a goal, getting a goal your goal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you need to have some focus on where to put your awareness, whether it's a desire, a goal, a wish, a dream, whatever. Like that has to be somewhat clear to you before you can possibly achieve it. And the times where we lose those goals and we don't have them present is usually when shit goes weird or chaotic. Like we're just handing over the reins to something we're not actively engaged with.
And that's like the learning process, because it's not like the universe is always there, like the moment that you want it to be. Because if it was like that, it probably suck, honestly, if
No,
we
it is
always
always there. Of course it's always there because it's
it
you.
is?
It's just because you don't like the way out there is hitting you doesn't negate that you're the one still generating it. Someone else isn't. Unless
Mm,
someone else saying, "Oh, let me fuck with Eric or Noah's lives." That's not what's going on. It's you are creating a reality that you feel maybe that you're not creating. And there are outside things that are taking over or influencing. But just because you forgot that you're the one doing it doesn't mean you're not doing it. that's what like the key kind of core message is here with a lot of what I try to talk about is that like it's always you. There's all it's not like at various times like some demon takes over your life and like is just like, hey, we're gonna fuck your shit up and you're gonna experience things you don't want to experience. It's you. It's but you have to recognize that and then be able to learn enough skills or cultivate enough qualities that you can actively be like, okay, I don't really want to experience this anymore. What do I want to experience? Let me put my energy into that and really try to speak to the higher levels of myself or my subconscious or unconscious and kind of get across that this is something I want to experience. But
Mm.
there is, once you start saying there's an outside universe, and again, this doesn't negate that like we experience people in a world out there and we interact with that. Like I've obviously, like, I'm not saying don't pay attention to your external relationships. It's just that once you start giving your power away to some outside external force, you're just playing a complicated game of hide and seek where you're the guy behind the curtain and like the Wizard of Oz. You're that, whoops, there's the big surprise. It's you. So at least experiment with that and, try to have fun with it and um, just see if that's true. That's like the most important thing. Test it out and see if there is some, ability you have to, be at odds, or not at odds, but like create a reality that you want. Like, you know what I mean? Like that, but you can't. I mean, you can, but like if you start saying like the universe isn't always there, well, are you always here? Where does the universe go? Like where did it go then? Were you in a void? Was it just like nothingness around you at all times? Then maybe we could say the universe went somewhere, but otherwise it's still there. You're still actively summoning and experiencing it, so
Mm.
it's always there.
Right. And as you were saying earlier, there is this process of learning how to manifest the things that you want by like noticing that it's you and that it's all you and acceptance.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things with like when we say manifestation, we're thinking of usually like, oh, like my dream life or this thing I want or this relationship I want or this experience of life. But it's everything. You're always manifesting. It's not like you're clicking and flipping a switch and be like, oh, now I will manifest. You're always doing it. It's just bringing awareness to how and what that process is what we would call having some agency over the process, not just like letting the
Mm.
thing just run without like minding the machine or tending to the garden, whatever analogy you want to use.
Mm. I see. Kind of like switching from the person inside the roller coaster to the person maybe controlling it
Yeah, or like if it's, I mean,
inside.
if you want to think of it like a roller coaster, sure. I mean, it's like autopilot or not. That's probably the easiest way to think of it. Like, are you putting on autopilot and checking out and along for the ride, or are you going to fly the plane?
And
That's the difference.
I think that's why journaling can be so helpful
Yeah, it helps you
because
focus.
yeah, and I love on one of your episodes you talked about how when journaling you can't let it feel like it's a chore.
Yeah, or don't stop doing it and then see if you miss it or see if there was some active benefit. You'll fall into patterns with journaling naturally.
Mhm.
But yeah, if it starts to feel like it's really you have to do this like it's homework, like I don't know, it never worked for me.
But it does also feel like when you are kind of doing it like for homework sometimes, I feel like it uh well, anytime you're journaling, it kind of like brings you back to that state of having being in control a
Yeah,
little.
you're taking the time to honor what it is that you want. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love journaling. Do you have any journaling tips or any
Just be consistent, note your reactions to what you're writing down internally as you're writing it down. Does it seem far fetched? Does it seem implausible? Or it's never going to
mm,
happen? Doesn't feel like I have it? Feels very natural? Doesn't? Pay attention to that type of stuff. And then just the consistency of it, whatever that is for you.
got it. Sweet. And I you're also a lot into tarot. So I don't know how you feel about this, but I thought it might be fun to maybe pull a card and maybe we can talk a little bit about. Maybe a card
Do
for like the podcast.
do you have a card?
Oh, I don't. I don't have any tarot cards, man. I'm not huge into tarot, but I would love to maybe get a little like perspective from you on tarot.
Well, I won't pull an actual card, but I mean, I'll tell you that like it's useful as a modality for like learning about energy that is all around us. Each card will represent
Yeah.
a various theme or aspect, and when that comes up and how you put those together, um, can create some pretty interesting perspective and combinations on what energy is going. It's also a
Mm,
way to get in touch with subconscious and unconscious things that we can't necessarily see. It's like dream analysis. Like there's not necessarily the same logic that applies um, to the cards or any kind of mystical divine art modality like that. And yeah, I mean, I love it as a tool. I use it for
mhm.
myself. I do it in readings, and yeah, I'm just a big fan of it in general.
It's kind of like your Spotify playlist that you have. I think about when I hit shuffle on those playlists, it's like pulling a card out a little.
Very similar. Exactly. I think Shuffle on Playlist is a hugely useful tool for getting into like music in particular is a really good way of getting in touch with the different aspects of your being for sure.
Yeah, and on regarding synchronicities, since we're a little bit on the topic, do you view synchronicities as, like you were saying, a something that is always there, and you just whenever you
Yeah,
experience it, is your
awareness flashing in that it's happening. Absolutely. They're an omnipresent reality, as Carl Jung would say.
mm,
It's always there. It's your ability to perceive and recognize its omnipresence that determines it appearing for you.
wow. And does that mean that we are like those are signs from like maybe ourselves? Are we kind of looking at ourselves whenever we experience a synchronicity?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if the whole premise is that you are everything, you are the universe, then that is going to be a message from you to you. Again, it doesn't negate the otherness of those things, the external qualities that happen that determine our meaning behind that stuff. It can involve another person. It can involve, thinking someone's going to call you and then they call you right in that moment. There's like a lot of different ways to like look at this stuff. But yes, on one level, it is definitely you, just kind of sending you a little wink in a way.
Wow. That is fascinating. I mean, that's like proof that there is kind of this higher intelligence kind of force out there,
Hmm.
I think. Wow. How did you I don't think I've ever heard how you got into um like Neville Goddard, for example, which you put me on through Duncan episode and
Yeah.
synchronicities and
Yeah,
stuff
there's
like
an
that.
episode, I don't remember what it's called, where I think I talk about that in length. But,
Mm,
long story short, it was just, one day I was looking for something and it found me. But, back in
yeah.
like 2019, you can probably find some episodes right when I start mentioning him where I go into that in depth.
That to me seems like another paradoxical question. Like, how can you like encounter something for yourself that you never knew existed? Like, how could you manifest something into your life, like you're saying, like that book or that phone call, without you knowing that you need it? Is that kind of like the whole point of manifesting? Like always, we are always.
Yeah, but that's your life. You just described life. I mean, that's literally your experience of life. Like, I don't know why it is that way, but that's just what life is. You are constantly learning about connections, external reality, people, places, things. I mean, that's just being alive.
Yeah, that is so fascinating. Wrapping your head around that. it can be confusing, but I love the metaphor of you used it on your last episode of letting go of the pencil, man, of having that visualization of letting go
Mhm,
because uh it you know it is really fun to uh mess around with the reality and get everything that you want, but I think like we're also safe ultimately, so
mhm.
there's always that option, right, to kind of let go of something.
Yes.
Yeah, is there anything that you do to whenever you catch yourself maybe being an autopilot to put yourself back in the driver's seat? Like any tricks or anything?
Yeah, just pay attention to your thoughts. Pay attention
Mm,
to where you are. Make a determination if that's somewhere you want to like stay in or perpetuate as a reality. Um, any of the imaginal techniques, uh, anything that resonates with you on a mystical or esoteric level is worth pursuing. Don't be afraid to try different things out and test everything you come across. Like, see if it actually works. Don't just take someone else's word for it.
that was beautiful. Exactly. That's why I love your stuff, Neville Goddard's stuff, because it's tested yourself. It's kind of like a come to the into the moment right now, and there's uh the idea of change kind of sneaks into uh that acceptance also, how to like just call forth change and how to look at change in
Mhm,
general. It's like is change good, is change bad? Sometimes like you say, we're like dying every moment,
mhm.
and how can we become more comfortable and friends with change?
Accept it. Just surrender to it being something that is an constant aspect of how we experience reality. It's not going to stop. So just accept it, surrender to it.
Is that kind of how we should think about the ego? What do you think
I don't know,
about?
like, should I mean, like, yeah, I mean, it helps to not crystallize identity and work only from that place. Like, it's not that helpful, but I mean, should I don't know, man. Like, that's
Yeah,
I don't know.
right. Yeah. Because the ego is also something that we hear a lot of times to kill. You know, we hear like ego death, um the death of the the intellectual or whatever. Do you think we should look at ego that way? I mean, maybe not. I know, but is ego our friend?
Yeah, you shouldn't make it an enemy. It's something that exists and is there. You shouldn't be at odds with it. A lot of people try to destroy or fight or push back the ego. I mean, good
Hmm.
luck. Good luck. No, I mean, you should make friends with it, recognize it's an aspect of your psyche and reality, and use it as a great tool that it is. And it can go out and get you things and work with it and just know its limitations and where its faults can be as well.
Hmm. It's like drawing a map of where we are,
Mm-hmm.
gaining some understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Do you practice meditation by any chance?
No, I don't. I did. I don't really. I probably not a bad thing for me to do, but I don't practice it.
Yeah, there's many types of meditation, right? Like listening to music could be considered a meditation, or
Yeah, I mean, whatever gets you in that zone, I probably should spend more time actively focusing on getting in touch with that aspect of being. But you know, it's a good thing to do. In no way would I say it's bad. You don't make a religion out of it, but it's certainly more often than not going to be a helpful thing of doing. You're just taking the time to examine your thoughts and your consciousness is a good thing.
amazing conversation. Noah, thank you so much for your time.
Mhm.
I really appreciate it. And everybody go check out Synchronicity. And where can people find you in case anybody wants to reach
Twitter,
out?
Twitter, Instagram, the usual places. Just my name.
And that will be in the description.
Cool.
And thank you so much, Noah Lampert. Have a great day. Hare Krishna.